Good evening, everyone. We're very excited that you're here for tonight's Hookup with Real Estate call. And we have a very special guest, Aaron Yassin, and we'll share a little bit about his story in just a few minutes. I want to do a little bit of housekeeping first. So let's get started. So I want to talk a little bit about our vision. And our vision is to educate aspiring and early real estate investors with the knowledge and skill to confidently invest in real estate while simultaneously avoiding costly mistakes like those my husband and I made early in our real estate journey. So we're all about the education here, and we love that we have special guests come on and share their stories as well. There are two ways for you to stay connected, right? With us, well, we have a YouTube channel. So if you go on youtube.com / do the @ hookup with real estate. We also have a Facebook group called facebook.com / groups with an S at hookup with real estate. So those are two great places to connect with us and stay connected. Also do want to mention that I have a book. I wrote a chapter in a book called Real Women in Real Estate. It's available for $2.99 on Amazon, or I can send you a signed softcover book for $17. And it's a great holiday gift for the women in your life, or anyone just wants to hear about some very good real estate stories. Okay, there's another thing that I want to share, which is we're sponsored by Learning Strategies, and they're having an Enlightenment Fest, which is all about mindset, if you will. And that's beginning December 4th. And there's I'll put the link in the chat later, and you can sign up for that if that interests you at all. And Ken, would you mind reading our disclaimer?
Surely. We appreciate you attending the Hookup with Real Estate Masterclass presented by co-hosts Kenneth and Donna Hook. The content we provide is strictly for educational purposes and is not intended as legal, financial, or investment advice. Remember, participation in this program is at your own discretion. Real estate markets are subject to change and can be dynamic. Neither Hookup with Real Estate nor its representatives will be liable for any outcomes resulting from the information provided. Seek professional advice before making any real estate or investment decisions. By attending, you consent to this event being recorded and understand that internet security is not absolute.
Thank you, Ken. And we'll go on to read the quote of the day.
A profound design process eventually makes the patron, the architect, and every occasional visitor in the building a slightly better human being. I can't read who it's by because I can't see that part.
Jahani Palasma. So I picked this because of our topic today, which we'll go into. But first, do we have any questions? Going once, twice? All right. So now let's talk about our special guest speaker. And our topic, which is Architecting Wealth, a design-centric approach to real estate investing with Aaron Yassin. And Aaron is a design-driven developer building ground-up construction apartments in Brooklyn. He has 20 plus years of experience in real estate in the field of design and fine art, and he holds a unique position in the development space. He has purchased, renovated, developed, and rented and sold properties with a current value of over $10 million. His first real estate investment produced a 70x return on investment. Wow. And since this purchase, he has closed well over 20 loans and executed a 1031 exchange and secured a 421A tax abatement. A lot of legal terms. We can talk about those during tonight's call. Anyway, Aaron won multiple design awards, including the prestigious Architizer A+ Award. And he's worked with world-renowned architects, artists, and designers, as well as Tiffany and Company, which is great, and the related group, plus the Museum of Modern Art, which is in New York City, a fabulous museum. His company, Hive Developers, was formed in 2021 with the highly respected Brooklyn-based contractor, Ty Block. Aaron and Ty are currently working on projects with an exit value of $15 million, and their goal is to share their knowledge and expertise with investors and help them grow their wealth through their unique proposition: design drives value. Well, we're super excited about this topic. I'm going to stop sharing and then I will. Oh, Felix is joining. Cool. He was also a guest here. Hey, Felix. We're just about to get started. I just introduced Aaron, our guest speaker. And so welcome, Aaron.
Thank you very much for having me this
bit.
evening.
You want to fill in any gaps from your bio that
I think that was a great intro, and I'm sure along the way we'll get into some further biographical details. So, but I'm currently based in Brooklyn, so I'm joining the call from Brooklyn, New York.
All right. Well, welcome from Brooklyn. Welcome. So tell us about you and what inspired you to get into design. Like, where was your first spark of inspiration, even before real estate?
Well, you know, my passion is really in fine art and design and architecture, and you know, like a lot of artists, it's really something that you just always drawn to. So, you know, all the artist friends that I have were always making things from a very young age, and I would definitely include myself in that group. Always, you know, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, you know, making various different things. Anything that I found, I would make something out of. And that passion just, you know, really continued. Also, you know, a unique component of my biography is that my father, his background is in art history, and his professional career, he was an art museum director. So while I grew up, my father was the director of the Indianapolis Museum of Art. So I was in an environment where you know, there was a lot of art around. I kind of grew up at the Indianapolis Museum of Art, and there were always a lot of artists around that he was working with, curating exhibitions with. So there was just a strong connection to that environment and to that world. So I've always had not just the passion to make things, but also, you know, a connection to other people that were doing the same thing into that environment.
That's cool, because Ken and I have real estate in Indianapolis, so now we have a reason.
Yes, you mentioned that. Right. You should go check out the museum. It's a terrific museum.
All right, we'll have to
highly recommended.
put that on our to-do list. Cool. So you have this artist background, you're hanging out in art museums, and where do you go from there?
Well, I went from there to Chicago, where I studied at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago.
Oh, wow.
And my you know, undergraduate time there in Chicago was very, you know, very focused in fine art, but Chicago itself is really one of the great architectural cities in the country. You know, there's you know, I think you can really trace the history of contemporary architecture in the city of Chicago itself. You know, the first skyscraper was built in Chicago, among other really remarkable buildings. You know, there was just, you know, I'm not going to get too far into the history, but there was the Great Chicago Fire, and after the fire, most of the city burned down, and the city was really rebuilt, and that rebuilding became this huge engine for the city. The whole city was relaid out, so there was a new city plan, and then there was tremendous architectural work that was built at that time. And of course, we know some of the great architects that did a lot of work in Chicago, including Louis Sullivan and Frank Lloyd Wright, among many others. So I was very, very significantly exposed to that environment. And I also, while I was there, I worked for an industrial designer who studied at the Illinois Institute of Technology, which was partly the legacy of the Bauhaus from Germany. So there were some artists, architects, and professors that had fled Germany before and during World War II, and some of them landed in Chicago and started teaching at the Illinois Institute of Technology. The Design Institute is actually designed by Mies van der Rohe, who is a very significant 20th century architect. And so there was a strong connection to that world in working with Eric, who I spent a couple of years working with. And his father also was an architect, and he was a partner at the firm Harry Weiss, which is a pretty significant mid-century modernist firm in Chicago. So there was a lot of, I was kind of really immersed in this environment. And there was always, even in my work, my fine art work, there's always a strong interest in light and space and really very significant qualities that kind of related to architecture. So I spent a lot of time looking at it and studying it.
Cool. So when John Sidoti was a guest on my podcast, he recommended the book Am I Being Too Subtle by Sam Zell, who purchased a lot of real estate in Chicago.
Right. Yeah, yes. Certainly great real estate investor. No question about it.
Yeah. So tell us about industrial design. What does it encompass? What exactly is that?
In industrial design or architectural design?
Well, you said you worked in industrial design.
Well, I worked for an industrial designer, right? Oh. And so what we were doing in that studio was basically making furniture, various different furniture and fixture commissions. So he had designed a kind of a collection of furniture pieces that were typically, generally we made a few of them for different showrooms and clients. And then also we created, other custom commissions, kind of furniture and fixture, different design objects. So those types of things are kind of considered sort of industrial design.
Okay. So then how do you end up in Brooklyn from Indianapolis?
Well, I really always wanted to end up in New York. So it was kind of a process of making my way there. I looked at art schools in New York, and it just, the School of the Art Institute in Chicago really seemed like the right fit. It was kind of closer to where I was at the time. It's a very unique environment that's very fine art focused. So I really had a great experience there. So I don't regret choosing to go there instead of moving to New York immediately after high school. But I was still in the Midwest. So at a certain point, I wanted to migrate from the Midwest and make my way out to the East Coast. So I went to graduate school in Washington, D.C. Okay. So it got me a little closer. I actually looked at some graduate schools in New York City, and didn't really find one that seemed like a great fit either. So I made it a little bit closer, and that was also it's very close. I was up and back from Washington to New York quite often while I was there. And there was a strong connection with the program that I was at with New York artists that would come down and do critiques and studio visits. So, and there were a lot of graduates from the program that ended up moving to New York. So I moved to New York after finishing graduate school in Washington, D.C.
Well, there's certainly a lot of amazing architect in Washington. You can't deny
It's definitely, it's a beautiful city, beautifully laid out and designed by a French city planner who did a fabulous job and created, I think, what's one of the most kind of European feeling cities in the United States, which is interesting because it happens to be the capital of the United States.
right, so now you're in New York, so let's up it a little bit. So how do you make the connection from fine art, industrial work to grad school to real estate? Like, take us there.
Well, it's an interesting connection. And when you start to kind of walk through it, it makes a lot of sense, at least to start thinking about real estate. So, one of the things that, every artist is always looking for is a studio space, right? So everyone's always looking for space of some sort. So I certainly was, it was in that category as well. Also, looking for, some place to live. So, early on, not long after I moved to New York, I was looking over in Jersey City, right across the Hudson from Manhattan, and I started looking for an apartment, and really quickly determined that I could buy an apartment for the same price it would cost me to rent an apartment. And actually have a better apartment and pay less money for it once I made the purchase. So that was my first foray into real estate. Actually, buying a small apartment that I lived in for some time, and then I had rented a studio space it was basically a multifamily building that had a unique commercial space in it. And not long after I had moved in and kind of built out the studio space, the couple of guys that owned the building, they came to me and said, "Look, we're thinking about selling the building. Feel like it's a good time." And I said, "Well, wait a minute. I just moved in. Maybe I'll buy the building from you." And at that same time, my father, who was, in a more kind of academic field, more professional field, had always seen some of the things that his father had done. My grandfather was much more entrepreneurial. He had some clothing stores in the Boston area, and also he bought and sold a lot of different things, and some of those were small multifamily buildings in the Boston area. So my father always kind of encouraged me, like, look around, see what you can find. And of course, I didn't need to look that far because I was in a building that a couple of guys were trying to sell. So I was able to, purchase that building, and that was the first multifamily asset that I ended up buying. And there were 3 rental apartments in the building, along with the space that I maintained as my studio. So between those 2 purchases, those were really the, kind of my connection into sort of the investing side of real estate. And I understood very early on from purchasing that apartment, really the value of leverage in real estate.
Oh, yeah.
And that was really kind of eye-opening, particularly since I was buying an apartment that ended up costing me less than it would have if I rented the same apartment. And, it was appreciating, particularly at that time, quite dramatically. And, I had a loan on it that, I was paying the debt on it, and that was costing me less than it would have to rent, and also watching the apartment appreciate. So I could see all the different ways in which real estate was just, such a positive way to invest and generate some income, and also generate more long-term wealth.
So for those who want to know about, some of the challenges you might have faced in that early apartment, do you have any you want to share?
Well, in that first multifamily building, there were quite a few challenges that I could point to, and several of them are challenges that I'm really trying to avoid now, and maybe are partly what have led me in one of the reasons that led me in the direction that I'm working in at the moment. It was an old building, 100 and I don't know, well over 100 years old. Let's put it that way. Had a fieldstone foundation, was attached to another building, wood frame, lots of different sidings on it. So it had a lot of problems, and problems that really you could never completely correct. I renovated one of the apartments. I jumped in. I basically renovated the entire apartment myself shortly after I purchased it, and that definitely improved that unit. And then even I sold the building some years later, and the person that bought it did even more extensive renovation, but the building kind of looks the same. It's an old building with a lot of problems, and in a way, kind of, in my opinion, not really redeemable problems. So, and regardless of what I did, there was going to be more problems, constant problems. You know, things were not going to work. Electrical wasn't going to work. The electrical systems were old, lots of different wires everywhere. Plumbing infrastructure, terrible condition. You know, the walls leaked air. Even the replacement windows weren't great. So pretty much everything about it wasn't great. The location was pretty good though, invaluable. So, you know,
Skipping the jump from
locations,
New York, yeah.
location is certainly a, you know, critical value driver, but you know, definitely that type of asset was something that, you know, long term I understood I really wanted to avoid.
Great. Thanks for that. Hi, Karen. Thanks for joining. So where do you go from your old building with lots of problems? What's next on your journey?
So from there, you know, I really understood that that, you know, there was a lot of value in investing in real estate. So and I was, you know, talking to other friends and other people that I knew at the same time. And of course, there's a lot of interest in real estate in New York. Everyone talks about it, right? So in conversation with some other friends who were also artists, you know, we started looking for a building that we could turn into kind of live work lofts. Although, you know, for me, I was kind of on I was able to go either way. You know, I was happy if we could find something that would be a good investment that maybe had some long-term potential, or, you know, the kind of live work loft that appealed to me also. So there was, you know, some different options on my side. So we looked and we found a few buildings, but to kind of sum up the conclusion there, we ended up finding a property in a fantastic location that was not going to be live work lofts. It was an old, not that old, but a more recently built commercial building, single story commercial building. That just an old garage in a great location in Williamsburg. So for people that don't know Brooklyn, this is a neighborhood that's seen extraordinary growth in the last 20, 25 years, much of which has been driven by a rezoning that took place in 2008. So we found this property, and it was really a long-term investment project with development potential. And also we purchased it prior to the rezoning. And that was we acquired the property in 2004. The rezoning occurred in 2007, and we started our development project in 2008 and completed it in 2010. So we were able to purchase an asset with air right development potential, and that was really my third investment.
Air right.
So,
So what
so there was a single story garage building. We ended up finding a tenant that was a restaurant tenant that moved in and built out a restaurant in the space. And they spent probably $500,000 building it out because it was just essentially an open garage at the time. So there was a lot of investment required for the build out. But you know, as a single story building, you can build on top of it. You could demolish it and build that way, or you could, you know, develop what would be the air right. So in New York City, you're able to build vertically, right? So there's zoning, and the zoning determines how much you can actually build. In most cases, older properties do not haven't fully built out the property. So there's more square feet that you can utilize in a construction project. In some cases, it's difficult to actually add space, and in other cases, you have rezoning that occurs where you can take a property that's very small and, you know, build a substantial tower. And so after the rezoning occurred, we were able to significantly enlarge the property. So I went from, you know, a couple of older properties, one, you know, with a lot of problems with it, and bought an asset that was about 20 years old, and then, you know, we developed new construction on top of that, on top of that building. And just, I really enjoyed the process of doing that, you know, having the opportunity to really build something new, and to envision something that didn't exist before really appealed to me.
So how high did you go on your new construction?
So we were able to build another 3 floors on the building. So we added about 3,000 square feet. And that was 4 apartments. And to do that, we actually had to work with the restaurant tenant. They had to close for a couple of months. We went in and we excavated and added some footings and some vertical steel I-beams, and we essentially built a new building on top of the existing building. So it's anchored in with its own footings and its own structural foundation that are inside the existing building. So you've got the one building that's the garage building, and then this other building that's kind of built on top of it. So we effectively built a table to imagine, like, put a building underneath a table, and then we built on top of that table. So there was some complication in just the engineering and that part of the process. But that, based on analysis and working with some consultants, that was the best approach to completing the project. And it didn't make sense to demolish the building or to take it that far at that point. There was a tenant in the space. The space is valuable as a restaurant, so it made sense just to build on top of it.
So tell us some of the lessons learned
Oh, that one was, it's interesting how you get into things, right? We were very inspired to develop this property. And I think it was one of those situations where, we were too young and too stupid to know any better. So yes, exactly. But we understood that this was a fantastic location, right? In which it was then, and it's only gotten better over time. I mean, now the location is, it's one of the primest locations in Williamsburg, which is one of the most highly valued neighborhoods in Brooklyn. So that was a given, and we really expected that to be the case. So we didn't see any downside in actually developing it, but we weren't that experienced in the process. And to kind of segue into maybe a story to tell another time, this very unique situation happened where, in the process of rezoning the the Williamsburg Greenpoint waterfront, there were some blocks that were excluded from the rezoning plan because there was some idea, which we could never figure out, that was presented to the zoning committee, that there should be some commercial blocks that are maintained.
Okay.
And we were in one of those blocks. So there was an architectural designer that had a handful of projects that he was working on, and he ended up organizing all of the property owners within these blocks that were excluded from the rezoning. And we actually hired a lobbyist and a zoning attorney, and we lobbied the city to get our blocks included back into the rezoning. And somehow it actually worked. I mean, I actually went one day. Ralph, he was the architect. He called me up and he said, "Aaron, can you show up at City Hall tomorrow? And there's an open comment section, so you can speak in front of the committee." So a few of us went, and we actually sat in and waited, and they let us speak in front of the committee. So the lobbyist position was, he couldn't figure out why the blocks were excluded because it didn't make any sense. And so his goal was effectively just to get us back, get them to take a look at it again. It was like, if we can get them, the zoning committee, to take a look at these blocks again, they may put it back in. He was like, that's the best shot you have. And somehow we were able to get them to look at it again, and they put the blocks back in.
Wow.
So it was that was a very stressful moment. So you don't know, you might buy a property with looking at something that might happen in the future, and there's risk, right? So if those blocks remained excluded, we would not have been able to develop what we developed. No residential would have been allowed. So this was really it was significant and very stressful because we purchased the property based on this rezoning happening. So in any case, that was one lesson learned. We were able to get through it. Definitely, I look at properties in a different way, trying to understand, what's possible to build on a given site now. particularly thinking about those factors. And there were numerous other lessons and things that happened. You know, we had problems with our commercial tenant. He ended up suing us after we gave him a year of free rent, which kind of sounds ironic, but it, you know, it wasn't from a psychological standpoint. I didn't get the irony at the time. And he ended up losing the lawsuit, and we actually got a judgment against him, of course, which he never paid. But that was certainly added some additional stress in the process. So there was tenant problems, there was zoning problems, and then there was also financing problems. And we were able to make it through all of those successfully. And I would say one of the great allies we had in the process was the general contractor that we ended up working with. And you know, this guy was just incredible. You know, it was really only as a result of Terry Miliakis that we were able to get the building completed and complete it successfully.
Yeah, but you talk a lot about mindset there. I mean, that's one of the challenges that real estate investors have, is things happen that you can't predict, you know, and you have to
Yeah.
have
I
that
mean,
mindset of just going around it, going through it, going under it, going over it.
you know, I don't know that I had a good mindset going through all that. It was very stressful. So, I mean, I can say that, you know, after we got out of our tenant space, and it was within a few days, we got a letter from his attorney. And of course, keep in mind, you know, we had to enter into an agreement with our tenant, right? Which we paid for, because we wanted him to do something for us. So of course, we have to pay his attorney fees. So he got his same attorney to start sending us these very, very aggressive letters. And I called our real estate attorney, and he's not a litigator. He was like, Aaron, you have to respond to this immediately. But keep in mind, every response that you make, you know, is going to be part of the process of the litigation that you're probably headed toward. And I'm like, oh my God. Like, so I'm like up in the middle of the night, like writing these letters, like 2, 3 in the morning. So it's like, we had to respond immediately. And I didn't have anyone else that could do it. And I'm just, I mean, it was, you know, very, very stressful, you know, all while we're trying to, you know, build this building. Although I did get some great feedback from my attorney. He was like, Aaron, you know, maybe you should have gone to law school. I was like, you know, I appreciate that you like my letters. So I don't think that's what I was destined for. But you know, at least I was able to respond reasonably well to a very skilled attorney. So there was a lot of stress involved. And actually, I don't know how I got through all of it. I think I have a little bit better mindset now.
There you go. I know it's very tough when you're going through it, but okay. So so now, do you still own that building? You still own it?
I actually exited out of that property last year, and my primary partner in the project, their motivation was to always one day live in the building. And you know, for me, it was more of an investment. So last year we were able to you know, to work out a deal, and they've now moved into the property.
Oh, cool.
So you know, it's interesting because when you get into something at that age, right, you're not necessarily thinking of where it's all headed. So I would say one main lesson that I learned is to really have a clear exit strategy when you're getting into a property. We didn't have an exit strategy. And, you know, we talked about what we were going to do for years, and there was never anything that was apparent of how we could do anything with it. You know, it was a great rental building. The cash flow was excellent. So it's like, okay, what do we do? You know, how are we going to figure this out? And fortunately, this solution materialized, and it really made sense to do it. So, you know, they got what they wanted out of it, and I was able to exit it very, in my opinion, very successfully. So it was really a you know, win-win situation.
Yeah, and the irony is, like, you know, your property that you got as a multifamily, the owners came to you, and now, you know, your partner's coming to you again and saying, look, I want this property. So things are just kind of falling that way. Cool.
But you know, I would certainly advise people to, particularly when they're, you know, getting into partnerships early on, because partnerships are incredibly valuable, to think about where you're headed, and you know, particularly if you're purchasing an asset, what's your plan with it? You know, how long are you planning to hold it? What happens if, you know, something doesn't work in the market? Do you need to hold it longer? Would it be better to maybe sell it even if there's no great profit that's made, and move the capital into something else. Agree on, what your plan is, and really you might want to even write it down, like, this is what we're agreeing to do now, particularly if it's just a couple of people getting together to purchase something and it's not really legally structured in a certain way. Because if you don't do that, then it can just be a mess. I mean, there's lots of stories of partnership problems, and in many cases they just don't end well. Even buildings that have significant value, having a partnership problem, can just lead to a loss for everyone.
Yeah, we know a lot about partnership problems, so that's
So that's one thing that I would certainly advise people. Although in this case I didn't have any. There were some other partnership problems that I'm not bringing into the conversation, but with that partner, we always were able to work out any issue with it. So that was terrific.
so beyond so let's talk a little bit about partnership selection. Maybe they were your artist friends early on, but now you might look at them differently, look at partnerships differently. So
yes, absolutely. I mean, most artists aren't real estate professionals. So, when you're talking about real estate in a different way, you're probably going to be looking at conversations with different people. So certainly, at this point, so the composition of our current entity, HUWRE Developers, is myself. There's four partners, myself and Tal Locke, and he's a general contractor. He's been working as a general contractor for quite a few years in Brooklyn. And this is where the partnership started, that I had purchased another property. After building this building in Williamsburg, just step back for a second. After building this building, the result of the project was terrific. I mean, we were building it through the Great Recession, and we completed it in 2010. When things still didn't look so great, right? We were actually able to rent the building for exactly what we projected prior to starting in 2007, before the whole crash.
oh, wow.
So the neighborhood was so strong that we hit our numbers, even though we had some concern about it. And we had tenants that were waiting. We rented it, and we still had some work to do, and they waited, I don't know, 4 or 5 weeks before they could move in. I can't remember exactly what they did, but we didn't have any problem. They were willing to wait. It's been one of the easiest buildings to rent. Part of it is because of the product. The apartments are excellent. They're beautiful apartments, and I spent a long time working with the designer that we worked with, Ralph. I worked on the floor plans with him, and we really worked very carefully on the design to achieve a certain level of product. And actually, this contractor that I mentioned, they really gave us a hard time for insisting on certain details. But then later I talked to the project manager that worked on it, and he was like, yeah, we were working on another building, and Terry told me, he's like, look, let's do it like we did it on 58. That was the address of our building. So ultimately they liked what we did, and they actually emulated it on some other projects that they worked on. So that really, I could see there in that project, the value of the work that we put into it and the kind of product that we built. And I really, even through all of those problems, was inspired to be able to do something, like that again. And just, part of it, the artist in me just really loved building and actually making something. I love to make things. And here's, an opportunity to make something that's bigger, that also has other uses for it. People live in it. It's an architectural kind of, that building particularly is somewhat iconic in the neighborhood. It becomes something more than just the sum. It's the sum of the parts, and really that design really, it does drive the value of the property. There's no question about it. So that was really inspiring, and I wanted to do it again. And it took me many years to figure out how to do it again. I didn't have another partner that was lined up. I didn't have the financing. There's all the components that you need to do to put something together. And maybe I could have. This is one of the things you think back on. What are the lessons learned? What could you have done differently? Right. I met people that I was talking to. I was constantly looking for potential partners, and nothing really ever. It took a while years for something to really materialize. I ended up buying another property that I thought I could develop at some point, and that's one of the projects that we're actually working on now. So I purchased a building in 2016 that was a 2-unit rental property that was kind of a decent property to tear down and to build a new building on. And the goal was to buy it and rent it for a while, and then hopefully, if the conditions improved in the right way, to then tear it down and build a new building. So I finally had another asset that I could work with, that I was able to purchase on my own. And once conditions did change enough, I started looking for a partner that I could work with. And I was looking for a contractor, but I was also looking for a contractor that I could partner with. So this is, I'm taking the story full cycle. So that's how I found my current partner. I was just very directly searching for a contractor that was interested in partnering on a development project. And I did it in a very, I kind of did a lot of research to figure out who would be appropriate. So what I did to find Tal was I took a look at all of the buildings in and around the vicinity of where my property was. And I looked up, I researched the buildings, figured out who you can find who the filing architects are, and I started calling them, right? I wanted to find someone that I could work with in that capacity, and I also wanted to find some contractors. So I called a bunch of, of the filing architects, and then quite a few of them picked up the phone, of course, because it was a possible project. And I asked all of them, for contractor references and, who they thought might be interested in partnering. And I then called those people. I put them in a spreadsheet, and I had a list. And Tal was kind of the most receptive. There were actually one or two others that were also interested, but they didn't feel like the right fit. So it was really through taking that kind of research approach that I was able to find a partner to work with on the project. And now we've become more closer business partners. And then we have two other partners that we've recently brought into the partnership team to assist us with investor relations, capital raising, marketing, and marketing management, kind of CRM management, and financial analysis. And these are they're two great guys. They actually are highly skilled. So we're kind of splitting up the responsibilities and different things that we're doing. So we've really built out the team at this point.
That's cool. We'll get back to those topics in a few, but just going back to the design that you built into your building, the first building. So tell us about the design. Is it the exterior? Is it the interior? Or is it both? What should we consider for, what should real estate investors consider as part of it?
Well, I would say that even with that project, I definitely learned a few things. So we did a very interesting facade that incorporates some Core 10, which is a kind of steel that rusts naturally. It looks beautiful and it's very iconic, which is definitely adds value to the building, but it's proved for quite a while to have some maintenance issues. So it's interesting the kinds of things that you need to think about when you're doing design work that you might not initially think about unless you really understand and have had and owned real estate. So you really start to think about some of the maintenance requirements and understand what's needed. So while we built an iconic facade, it led to different maintenance issues. But that iconic facade is something that is definitely kind of a landmark in the location where it is in Williamsburg. I mean, it's been photographed, probably a million times. It's incredible. I mean, for years, like I'd show up there and everyone was stopping in front of the building and taking photographs of it. So, I mean, that definitely, created a certain aura around the property. So definitely high marks on kind of curb appeal, which is a term that's often used, right? And then, the interior work also, we really focused on creating very functional layouts, very organized spaces, very clean spaces, and just with a lot of attention to detail. We really focused on building the windows in. We have windows that are fit all the way into the wall, so they're really true floor-to-ceiling windows, wall-to-wall windows. The lines are very clean, very straight. So things that are very hard to achieve in a lot of new construction, and they just make the apartments have a certain quality that stands out in the market. They're really nice spaces. And they all have exterior spaces, and there's something that's really nice and different in each one of the apartments. And there's only 4 of them, so it's okay. I built 4. It would make sense to build a few more. See what else you can do, right?
Yeah. Okay, so clean lines. I'm just thinking in back of my head, like some people are flipping houses. They're not going to necessarily get that creative or need to get
Right.
that
So
creative.
I mean that okay.
Depends
So
on the project.
yeah. The question is really, how does someone think about design if they're getting into real estate investing? I think that's what you're kind of thinking through, right?
Yes.
You're looking at properties. What are things that would make sense to think about? So some of the bullet points that I've kind of listed prior to starting the conversation was to really think about that all real estate is really architecture, right? So we think about real estate as investors very often based on the numbers, right? We look at an asset, we look at the purchase price, we might, if it's a rental property, we might look at what the rental numbers are, we might compare other rental numbers and maybe consider the condition of the building, and then maybe make little adjustments. And a lot of it comes down to making assessments in a spreadsheet, right? This is a way of looking at the investment part of the property, which is terrific. You need to do that. The underwriting is critical, and if the underwriting doesn't work, then of course the investment doesn't work. So it's important to start there, but that's a starting point. Beyond that, to really understand what you're thinking about in terms of architecture. And architecture is literally the process of planning, designing, and constructing a building, and then the result of that process. So every single building, every piece of real estate is architecture. And we tend to think of architectural monuments as architecture, and potentially not, a single family home or, a small apartment building, like, the U.S. Capitol. That's a, great work of architecture, or, the Empire State Building. But in fact, these are all real estate assets, right? So thinking about how you're looking at a property when you're assessing, you're out on the market, right? You're looking for an asset, right? You want to buy, let's say you're trying to buy a house to flip, or you want to buy a small multifamily, 2-family, 3-family. What is it that you're looking at? What is it that you like about the property? Is it just based on the numbers of the property, or are there other aspects of the property that really appeal to you? And I would encourage people to start to think about the experience of the property itself, whether it's in good condition or in terrible condition. And sometimes if it's in terrible condition, that's an opportunity, to really develop and add value and think through how you can approach the design as you're doing the value add in the property. So if you find a property that's not in great condition, but there's something about it, where it's, first, of course, where it's located, and the qualities that are inherently there in the property itself. So I'll go back to that first multifamily that I owned. There wasn't really any redeeming quality in it. It was an old building. There were some details in it, some railings and things like that, but nothing of really any value. There was no architectural value, no design value in the property itself. Nothing that could be enhanced or redeemed based on what was there. So I think that's something that's important to look at. So where are you starting from? Is it that, and you need to basically come in and kind of gut the property and think about how the spaces will look and feel after you do that work? Or are there some aspects of the building that you can actually restore that would, enhance the property itself? What are the details that are there? What does it look like when you're approaching the property? Can you improve it and make it more attractive, right? And can that experience, kind of as you're, kind of the curb appeal, can you translate that into the property itself? And what are the steps that you can take to do that? And it's not just looking, okay, I'm going to change the kitchen, and you get, you know, whatever you think is the kitchen that fits into your budget. You know, how can you enhance that? And really thinking about, I mean, I'd like to talk about kind of the narrative of a property, right? That's the narrative experience of the people that live in the property itself. What is their experience going to be like? You know, what's the atmosphere of the building? What does it feel like? You know, think about how we experience our homes, right? You know, you come home, you have dinner at your house, like you have your family at your house. What kinds of things do you do in the property itself, and what's that experience like? And how, as a real estate investor, can we think about those spaces and the design of those spaces that will really enhance those experiences for the people that live in the properties? And when you think about those things and you actually work on adding that value in the process of renovating a property, then the people that then experience and live in the properties can feel it. And this is a really important way to look at real estate as assets.
Right, because it also can drive up rent if you have a, you know, a nice property.
Absolutely, absolutely. And really, your tenants will likely be happier paying more money because they know it's worth it. They experienced it. They experience that value every day.
Yeah. Now, I know in New York, there's not a lot of yard per se, but I imagine, you know, landscaping can also play a part.
Well, I mean, outdoor space is definitely a premium. So certainly in doing new development work, you know, I'm always thinking about, you know, how we can provide outdoor space, you know, for most, if not all, of the apartments. It's definitely, you know, it's a great amenity to have with every apartment. And it's possible in some cases actually to get in one of the projects we're working on, we were able to get outdoor space with all 10 of the apartments. And that definitely adds value to all of those apartments. And one of them also will have a common shared yard, and both projects that are in process will have common roof decks. So, you know, those kinds of amenities really add value to the properties as well, because, you know, the older buildings, older multifamilies, you know, don't have those kinds of spaces.
No, so that is one advantage of building from the ground up, is that you can design
Absolutely.
features and amenities that tenants want.
Absolutely, absolutely. But I think some of those things can be added into existing properties as well. So, you know, if you're thinking about how to enhance a existing property, you know, if you're thinking about those things, you can come up with creative ways that you can design amenities into a property that will increase the value. But they'll also increase the value of the experience of the property. And people will pay more money for that.
So have you found any specific amenities or features or, you know, materials that actually are reasonable but add extra value to?
I mean, there are many, in fact, and I think that in most cases, people have the misconception that you have to spend a lot more money on design, that's a requirement, and it's absolutely not. You know, I really like to you know, to debunk that myth. You can spend a lot of money on certain finishes, absolutely, no question about it. But you don't necessarily need to still build, or if you're, you know, renovating a property, to achieve a terrific product. And I can give you a couple of examples. You know, for one of our projects that's a little bit further along. You know, we have triple pane UPVC windows that we've sourced from Europe, right? They're actually on a boat right now traveling across the Atlantic to New York. And these windows are extraordinary, right? The quality is at a much higher level than what I was getting priced out here locally, and with Pella windows that I, you know, really don't like very much. So they're you know, they're essentially like passive house quality windows. So with a triple pane system, you know, they provide an exceptional level of insulation, and also the profile provides additional soundproofing. So we're able to source windows for our project at a lower price and get a higher product.
And have them
So,
shipped from Europe. That's interesting.
right. I mean, you just, you need to you figure out the timing and, look at your lead times and your schedule, but you need to look for these things. What does take, what you need to put into the projects is you just got to put you have to put some thought into it and some care into it. And then, that's where a lot of that value comes from. We're ordering some tiles and they're coming from Italy. People might think, oh, Italian tiles, like they're going to be incredibly expensive. Well, I mean, we're getting the tiles, well under $10 a square foot. Not extraordinarily expensive tiles in any way, and they're it's a terrific product. It's just a misconception that you've got to spend $20-$30 a square foot for tiles to get great tiles. That you've got to spend.
Just to interrupt 1 second, I don't know if you know, but Ken is a tile contractor, so he can talk.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
No, I didn't know that, Ken.
What size tile are they?
Well, they make a lot of different size tiles, but the ones that we're getting, because it was definitely, I was focused on price point. So what they were offering, what they were able to offer with the tiles that we're purchasing is they have one standard size that's 24 by 48 inches, and they could sell that to me at the most advantageous price. They also make very large tile slabs, and if you buy the larger slabs, they're at a higher price. But I'm sure that no one else is going to this manufacturer and thinking, oh, these are going to be reasonably priced. I was actually surprised when they told me the price, because I said, look, I'm not sure that I can, afford your tiles in our project. And they were like, they're Italian guys. They're like, no, don't worry. We're going to work with you. And it was like, fantastic. Oh, I love it. So they make large tile slabs that are 5 feet by 12 feet, and they're used often for building exteriors. They do rain screen systems. They have tiles that are used for countertops. So they have quite an interesting range, and they're very architectural in their manufacturing. The company is called HUWRE, Florim. Highly recommend them. So if anyone's looking for some interesting tile, you can check it out. My point is that you spend some time looking for these things. You can find and it's really easy now. Like, go look on Pinterest, start saving things. Look on, Instagram. You'll start getting ads, right? Like, oh, that looks interesting. It's amazing what you can find. Like, I did actually find this window company on Instagram. I was searching for this type of product, and they retargeted me. And I got in touch with them, and very ironically, the guy that I'm dealing with in Prague grew up in upstate New York and ended up moving to Europe.
Wow.
Was in upstate New York. Roberto, right? You were in upstate New York, and Roberto is also an architect, so he can.
Oh, fantastic! Well, thank you for
How you doing, Aaron?
Wonderful.
Yeah, I'm down here in Florida, in Miami. We were working on renovating a historical hotel. Like, excellent project. You would love to see it. I'm sure if you can buy it, I'd love to show you. Where in New York are you?
I'm in Brooklyn.
Awesome.
I've spent time are you in Miami Beach?
The Design District in Miami.
Oh, okay.
Midtown.
Okay.
Midtown, and yeah.
Yep.
It's awesome. It's nice. I'm here for a while. I'm here on the project, but normally I'm up in Tampa area, which is also nice.
Okay.
But you can't beat the weather.
Well, this time of year, in August, maybe.
I know.
Well, thanks for joining.
Come down and visit and warm up.
Okay. I might take you up on that.
All right, so let's switch gears a little bit. So, how is design and development different from other forms of construction? Let's say for finding a deal and raising risk capital and asset management and capital raising and finding KPs, key principles. So we like to go over those topics for our newer investors.
Excellent topics, because there's a lot of different asset types out there, and there's different ways of structuring deals as well, and there's different impacts on those deals. So of course, as we know, as existing investors, the higher interest rate environment has really created a lot of challenges, right? So for people that are just getting into investing now, they're probably looking at loans that are much higher that clearly are much higher than they were a couple of years ago, and that just creates challenges in trying to get into the space. You know, one of the things for us as developers, the interest rate variability has an impact, but it doesn't have the same level of impact as, let's say, a cash flowing multifamily or a value add multifamily. You know, we're working with short-term bridge debt, and, you know, sure, every point makes a difference, but, you know, if we're looking at bridge debt at 10% versus 12%, it's much different than, you know, a longer term commercial note that was 3% and now is 7.5%. So the impact on your holding costs, your debt service coverage on that kind of variation is enormous, and really is, you know, it's a deal breaking situation. But, you know, for us, if it's, you know, 2 points higher, 3 points higher, okay, it has some impact. But, you know, if you're working in the right way and you're really adding a lot of, we're building the value. And if we end up with the right product in the end, you know, there's always a high likelihood that, you know, we're going to be able to sell the product better. So one, you know, what's the value of design in what we're doing, right? There's a couple of things. One is, you know, ideally we can sell at a higher price, and I would say that's typically the case. But the other is just it's an absorption question. How long does it take? You know, we're building condos, so how long does it take to actually sell those units, right? If you've built something or you've renovated something, it's just really not that well done or that attractive. It's going to take you longer to rent it or to sell it, right? So this is something that, you know, from a design standpoint, I would really encourage people to think about as well. You know, you do a little bit more, you focus a little bit more on the design. If you're renting apartments, you're going to rent them a lot faster, right? It's not going to sit on the market for a month or 2 months because people are looking for something and they see something better someplace else. They're going to be really attracted to your product and they're going to rent it more quickly. I've rented apartments in 5 minutes or less before, you know, because people really like what they're looking at, and it's happened multiple times. I mean, this property that I mentioned in Williamsburg, my partner was handling the showings. I'm getting a little off topic from your question. I'm going to come back to it. You know, he would handle the showings sometimes, and he would call me and say, "Aaron, you know, there's too many people here. You know, can we do something about this?" You know, there were a couple of apartments we rented. Literally, everyone wanted to be first, right? So we were trying to stagger the time. And he'd show up, and there were 30 people waiting outside the building. There's you know, it's a high demand area also, but it was, you know, a unique product in a market. So, you know, coming back to your question, right? How do you think about, you know, some of these metrics and, you know, some of the loan costs and other costs? You know, I really recommend anyone that's getting into investing to take some time and really study and learn the underwriting process. You know, this is a really critical aspect of real estate investing, and it's easy to get into, you know, buying a house and flipping it. You can look at 2 or 3 numbers and think, I buy it at this price, I sell it at this price, you know, okay, it'll work. But that's great when things are going well. But if things start going not quite as well, then there's more variables that enter the equation. And if you build out a model that can take into account those potential variables, and you can really look at it carefully at the beginning, and you can even do this on a, you know, single family flip, right? You know, what happens if your interest rate changes? What happens if some of your renovating and your material costs go up? What if it takes you longer? What if the insurance cost increases? You know, what do the comps look like? You know, I would want to see all those numbers in an underwriting document, even for a single family flip. And then when you start getting to, you know, into something that's more complicated, there's really a requirement to understand, you know, how you can build a proper underwriting model and make sure that that underwriting model is solid and conservative and has a reasonable sensitivity analysis that's built into it. So, you know, okay, if the market drops 10%, what is it going to look like? If your interest rate goes up 2 points, what does that look like? Well, if it goes up, interest rate goes up 2% and the value goes down 10%, what does that look like? Are you going to be okay, or are you going to be underwater? What happens then? How do you really, you know, perform proper, you know, risk adjusted analysis? And that's really critical. You know, I'm talking a lot about design and how design can add value to any project. And that's the kind of thinking that I think everyone should have. But get the underwriting to work first. That's really critical. Have the right asset that you know that you can develop in the right way, but make sure that the underwriting works, or else, you know, things might not work so well.
No, that's a good point.
So if people aren't familiar with the underwriting process, you know, I definitely recommend, you know, looking for resources and learning more about what that looks like.
Yeah, that's what we're learning that right now. We've got a ways to go, but to get good at it.
I mean, there's some good models out there. You can download some underwriting documents. You know, Rob Beardsley at Lone Star Capital has free underwriting spreadsheets that you can download. They're pretty good. You know, those are a good resource, good place to start. But there's others also. And there's classes that you can take. I did actually take a course, and you know, we did a lot of sections on underwriting in that course with people that do it all the time. So it was definitely extraordinarily helpful. And they sent their documents also, and I'm using one of them. I have a few of them. So do it. You won't regret it. Spend the time.
Yeah, spend the time, spend the money. Got it. All right. So what about getting like earnest money deposits down or risk capital? Are you looking outside your team for that, or are you all self-funding?
Well, we do raise capital. One of the two
Not
projects
so much raising capital, the stuff before the deal closes.
the kind of the contract,
The
earnest
due
money,
diligence, the attorneys, yeah.
some of the pre-development. Sure. Most of that at this point has come from, you know, just we have funded that, but that's something that we're, you know, for future projects, we're really trying to figure out, you know, what the best approach is, because we're looking at larger projects, and obviously the numbers go up. And, you know, it's challenging in New York because the expectation for earnest money is 10%. You know, so if you're looking at a $5 million asset, you're talking about $500,000.
So John Lane
Okay,
wants
that's a good question. He wants to, John, we have a question coming in from John Lane. He wants to know how much more you can charge for rent for an exceptionally designed apartment. That's a very good question. So again, I point at two things, right? One is that, you know, without question, you're going to rent it much more quickly. You know, so your loss factor is very low. Your loss income factor is very low. And then, you know, it's kind of, you know, can be up to you, you know, what you want to hold out for. But I think, you know, depending on the location and the quality of what you have, and the quality of the design, that it's easily possible to get 10% more, and potentially possible to get 20% or more if you have a better product, at least in our local market. So there's a noticeable difference, and that the loss income factor is, you know, is huge. Like, you know, with this property in Williamsburg, you know, I mean, we would turn over apartments in 3 days. You know, we hardly had 3-4 days, you know, and it was amazing how often, like, people were flexible. You know, we'd find people like, oh, these guys are going to move out on the first or some, or the 31st, you know, can you move in on the 4th? And people were like, sure, that's fine, no problem. Like, okay, great. We got 4 days to, you know, get the apartment ready to go. And that was it. That's the downtime. And some people would just pay the full month rent anyway. So there was actually no lost income. So, you know, you can, if people are motivated, I mean, that's partly, it's a demand driver. So if you have a lot of demand and then you have a better quality product, you know, you're just going to be better positioned. There's no question about it.
and the location is key there too.
Even in locations that may be not prime locations, if you're comparing similar size apartments and you just have an apartment that has that much more appeal, even if it's a little bit higher price, you're going to find a lot of interest.
Okay.
People want to live someplace that's better, right? That's nicer. I know I do. And I think most other people do. Of course, there's going to be some people that are price driven and only price driven, but they're probably not looking at what you're renting anyway. You know, if you've done any renovation work, you're not the lowest price point in the market.
Correct.
So those renters or those buyers, they're looking for the lowest price point, which is not a, you know, a newly renovated property. It's going to be an older property, which is probably not what, you know, we're doing and we're renting as real estate investors.
Yeah. All right. So going back, in terms of, so you're self-funding the risk capital right now, but you're looking at different options if you do bigger projects, is what you're saying. Is that what
That's correct. Yes. We're trying to figure out, and now, you know, we have more partners in our project team, and we have some other investors that we're working with. So I think, you know, we're growing in the right way, where we have more resources, you know, to have conversations with potential investors to kind of, you know, kind of come in sort of in the, you know, GP fund or something that's earlier on in a project. Of course, you know, the returns would be different in that context, but there's, you know, some different ways that we can look at arranging some of that capital. But, you know, there's definitely challenges in where we're working, because you're purchasing an asset and then you need to do all of the pre-development work, which takes time. Can take 6 months, it can take 8 months. Hopefully it doesn't take that much longer than 8 months. Particularly if you're doing some demolition work. Also, there's demolition filing. We haven't really talked about some of, you know, the mechanics, and there's a lot of mechanics involved in doing new development work. You know, not just doing all the plans, but all the filing that's involved and making sure that process goes as smoothly as possible. And that's not to mention, you know, if you're doing demolition, you've got to get all the utilities cut off, and there's inspections and requirements for doing that as well. So how do you manage that that part of the process prior to starting the actual construction, when there's significant costs involved in doing that? So there's definitely some heavy lifts in the process from a capital standpoint.
Got you. So some definitely things to consider. Now, when you're building these now, are you building them to sell, or are you building them to rent?
We're building to sell, so we're building condominiums.
Okay. So there's not I mean, there's still some asset management up until the point that you have to sell them. So can you talk a little bit about that?
There's a little bit of asset management, but you know, hopefully, you know, once we're done with the construction, you know, we're going to have we will have a brand new product. So in terms of the management of the asset, you know, it's going to be, you know, more limited. You know, I mean, there might be some maintenance, things happen. You know, even new construction, you know, sometimes something happens that you don't expect. Maybe some plumbing fitting wasn't perfect, or something else wasn't done. You know, in my opinion, buildings are never 100% finished, right? You get to 90+%, and then, you know, something happens, or, you know, and then you're maintaining something, and, you know, it just goes on and on. Every building, right? So, you know, you want to understand, you know, what you have in your building, and understand what you need to do to maintain it. So, you know, by building a new building, you know, we have all the plans. We know where everything is located. You know, we know what's going on in the property. You know, once it's finished, you know, we may need to just stabilize the insurance. You know, we would get new building insurance as opposed to construction insurance. And, you know, during the point when we're having closings for a condominium project, once the building is 50% sold, then the management of the building is transferred to a new condominium board. That's the threshold. So the sponsor will manage the property until 50% of the units are sold. So that could be 3 months, 4 months, 6 months. You know, hopefully for our projects, it's not it doesn't stretch on too much longer than that.
Okay. Oh, Ken
I have
wants
a nice question from Ken. Are the buildings green? I love that question, because we are definitely focused on sustainability. I mean, that's I was talking earlier about the triple pane UPVC windows, which are, you know, essentially kind of passive house. That's a whole nother topic of discussion. If people aren't familiar with passive house. It's an energy efficiency model. You can look it up. It's very interesting. So we're using windows of that type, and we're trying to use as many sustainable materials as we can. And we're only building electric buildings. We're not using any gas of any type in any of our projects. Of course, that will be a requirement by the city for certain size buildings coming up soon. But even for our projects that are smaller than where that's not required, we're still only doing all electric buildings. So we're trying to push the sustainability in the projects that we're doing 100%.
But no solar.
Solar is challenging in New York, unfortunately.
Yeah,
Another topic for discussion, but it's not just weather, it's about how the energy that you're generating functions with the existing infrastructure and with Con Edison. So it works if you have a single family property, but if you have multiple units, the solar only feeds into the with the called the PLP, which is the public meter.
Oh, gotcha.
Which is a problem. And I hope that the city at some point, working with Con Edison, can resolve this problem, because there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to use more solar. None. But there's a lot of different city agencies, and sometimes they can work together, and public utilities, and sometimes things work better and other times they don't work as well. So, we're doing what we can to be as sustainable as possible. That's certainly the goal. And we're looking for sustainable materials and to incorporate those into the design. And I think people appreciate them as well.
All right, cool. So let's just move on then to capital raising. What challenges and opportunities do you have there, or do you see?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and a very, very hot topic. So we have raised capital for our current project. I would say there's a couple of things going on there. Capital raising for syndications is it's a little bit more known quantity now, but real estate syndications have still only existed for about 12 years, since 2012. So it's not something that's existed for a long time. There's still a lot of people that have no idea what a real estate syndication is. I mean, I talk to people regularly that have no idea what it is, or that they have no idea that they can invest using their IRA in a real estate syndication. There's a lot that's still unknown about investing as a private investor in real estate. So there's definitely a strong educational component that's required to cultivate investors, and get them to understand how they can possibly invest and what they're investing in. And clearly, investing in real estate is valuable. That's why we're all here and we're talking about it. And so there's that educational component. And then I would say one of the other challenges that we face doing new development is that for people that have gotten into the syndicated real estate space, there are some more typical assets that people are syndicating. Multifamily, cash flowing multifamily, value add multifamily, self-storage, short-term rental, projects and asset classes that have immediate cash flow or that have near-term cash flow. New development is not, there's not as many new development syndications. I would say, for new development syndications in Brooklyn, I know only 3 people that are doing them.
Oh, wow.
And before yesterday, it was only 2, and that includes us. So I learned about another one yesterday. So that's it. You think, Brooklyn's close to 2 million people, and there's not that many people that are syndicating new development. And that also, a lot of the real estate syndications are in markets that, where there's a certain known quantity, many of which are in the South, North Carolina, Georgia, the Sun Belt, Texas, Arizona, Florida. So, and there's a lot of hesitation in, what are considered urban areas. So I would say, just from an educational standpoint, I need to educate people on investing in Brooklyn and what's going on here from a syndication standpoint, because there's not a lot of syndications that come up for investments in Brooklyn. So there's definitely a strong education component there. But on the upside, what we have that's different than where most syndications are at, our projects are relatively short term. we project 30 months from start to finish, which is far less than most syndications, which tend to be closer to 5 years. And hopefully we'll be out of the projects in less than 30 months. And also for new development, it's a higher return. So, when I'm underwriting a project, I don't consider that it pencils out unless I'm hitting for investors returns in the low 20s on a kind of an AAR, average annual return basis. That's what I'm looking for from an underwriting standpoint.
Cool.
Oh,
Um,
that's good.
yeah.
That's what, I mean, you look at investments, right? In real estate, and there's different levels of risk that you take, right? And typically, new development is considered to be, a higher risk. So you're going to look for higher returns. And then that's, it drops down, like what's the safest asset, like a absolutely new construction, class A, cash flowing rental property. Maybe in that right now you might get 8 to 12%. Maybe
So
it's
do you
less. I don't
consider
know.
your
Depends what their loan
properties
is.
that you're building Class A?
Oh yeah, we're building Class A, absolutely.
Good. What size project does your group build for 30 months?
So we're building currently an 8-unit building that once completed will be a little under 7,000 square feet, and the second project is a 10-unit project. The apartments are on average considerably larger, and that will be a little under 13,000 square feet when it's completed. I would say if we get up to maybe 20,000 square feet, 25, somewhere in that range, we should still be able to do it within a 30-month or less cycle. When you start to get into significantly larger projects, then they would take a little bit longer to build.
You get involved into a mid or high rise construction, or just
In terms of the projects that we're doing, we're not doing high rise construction at the moment with either of our current projects, but we're looking for projects that would be larger right now. But I still think in the range of what we're looking for, we would be able to turn the projects around in about 30 months. I mean, I don't know if that building behind you is the one that you're working on. I don't think it is.
Yeah, it's one of the buildings we did in Miami.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that would take longer than 30 months for sure.
I was all high-end, residential, golf estate homes, that kind of stuff. But the last 10 years, I joined the general contractor that only builds in Miami and South Beach. So I had to learn a lot about, 20, 30-story buildings.
Right.
That's what I've been doing for the past 10 years, which is kind of different. So before that, it was a design build business, but, residential mostly. But now we do like multifamily and hotels. So that's kind of neat difference. And if you're in the design business, it's a whole different ball game.
Hotel hospitality, absolutely.
All the MVPs, mechanicals, a whole different world.
Yep,
right?
Absolutely. But I mean, what would be your project duration for those mid to high rise?
Well,
36 months?
Well,
without a slowdown.
I got to tell you, about 5 years ago, we did a 20-story building, 290 units, okay, in the design district. And what I call postage stamp lot, right, which is just bordered by sidewalks, right, just a whole block, 19 stories high. And I think that we beat the record in Miami. We did it in less than 20 months.
Amazing.
20 months is unbelievable. It is.
Right.
But we're known for the speed, turning projects around.
Right.
But yeah, I do mostly high-end finishes. So my part of the project is usually the common area spaces, bars, restaurants.
Right. Yeah.
Full decks on the rooftops. It's no different ballgame down here in New York. You usually can't do stuff like that.
A pool deck on the rooftop. I mean, you can't beat that. There are some pools on rooftops in New York.
Yeah, private.
They tend to be a little smaller than the ones in Miami, though.
Yeah, they're private, but that's cool. That's cool. They do that. Yeah.
There are some new residential buildings that have. I mean, they're part of the building, but that have common pools for owners or residents that are on, that are elevated. I was in one over on a building called the Suffolk in the Lower East Side. Very small pool, amazing view. And they tend to only be about 4 feet deep also.
Yeah. Yeah, those those townhomes or row homes, whatever you do them on the high end district. Yeah, you can have nice rooftop,
There you go. We're hearing
open
from
air
right.
balconies. Is awesome.
Sounds
Yeah,
like you
I
and
love that.
Roberto, Aaron will have a great conversation at some point. But we're just almost out of time, so I want to just wrap this up with the two last questions.
Awesome.
So in terms of
Thank
finding
you.
KPs, like key principles, to sign on your loans, are you internal or are you going external with that?
Well, we haven't worked with a KP, or we haven't had to work with a KP yet. But again, as we scale, that may be something that we need to do. So, we're looking for people that are interested in participating on that level, so that we have resources, when we need it. So definitely something that we're looking for. So if anyone knows anyone that does kind of does the KP piece on the key principal piece or credit partner piece, we'd certainly love to have that conversation.
Yeah, we're working with a group that's going to be doing fund of funds, so that might be something else to talk about. Yeah, because they can
Fantastic. Yep.
projects. So you had mentioned there are 5 greatest architectural landmarks in New York City. Now I want to know what they are.
Was that in my
Yeah, in your bio.
That's on my what are 5 great architectural landmarks in New York City, and what can developers learn from them? Oh, well, I think we have just 3 minutes left. How about I give you a list of a few of what I think are the great architectural,
Yeah, you can 1 or 2, that's fine.
a few of the landmarks, maybe not the full discussion. Well, there are a few that I think are definitely obvious. And one might not be the first one that people think about, but I would certainly put the Brooklyn Bridge pretty high on the list. I consider that an architectural landmark. Of course, the Empire State Building is a remarkable landmark. So some of those key buildings, Empire State Building, Grand Central Station is absolutely extraordinary. If anyone hasn't been in the Great Hall in Grand Central Station, it's certainly it's a remarkable space. The main branch of the New York City Public Library is a remarkable McKim, Mead and White building. Definitely worth visiting. And then there are some other newer spaces or 20th century spaces that I think are particularly remarkable also. The Ford Foundation building on the east side is one that not a lot of people think about, but it's a David Roche building, who's a remarkable architect, and there's a incredible atrium, a landscaped atrium space inside that building that's absolutely worth visiting. So I'm giving that one because it's one that not as many people know about. Certainly worth a visit. And there's a few other ones that are kind of off the beaten track
building, I thought you'd say for sure.
The Chrysler building's a great building. I put that one on the list also. And I think there are some other new interesting buildings as well that are certainly worth visiting. I think the complex of the buildings that comprise the Museum of Modern Art are pretty remarkable. And it's gone through a few different phases. And they actually, on that block, there are towers that the museum has built as part of their project that are residential. And they have 2 towers that are both built by notable architects, including the newest tower that's a Jean Nouvel design. That's a pretty interesting skyscraper, residential skyscraper that's connected to the structure of the museum, not directly connected internally, but the museum itself is also definitely an architectural landmark, that has many periods. And I would say that some of it is better than other parts of it, but the sculpture garden at the Museum of Modern Art is an absolutely remarkable space and should definitely be visited.
All right. So my last question is that Ken and I are just a hop, skip, and a jump from New York City. So you show us around these places sometime.
Absolutely. Well, we should meet at MoMA. That would be a great place to meet. And we should get John Lane and anyone else that's here to join us. And certainly if it's not right now in winter, if we
Yeah.
wait for spring, they have a little cafe outside, and we can hang out in the sculpture court before we head up into the museum and see some exhibitions.
All right. Well, this is
That would be fantastic. I would enjoy that.
let's do it in the spring.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Donna and Ken, for having me on
Thank
today.
you.
I
Can
really-
you just put
I'm
your
really
information in
enjoyed
the chat real quick?
I
So
will do that. Absolutely. So here is we have a lead magnet at this location. And then our website is this.
by www.designdrivesvalue.com.
And then you can check out our website at hivedevelopers.nyc. You can get on our mailing list there as well. And you can always contact me here. At Aaron@hivedevelopers.nyc.
All
And
right.
I'm happy to have a call with anyone that's interested in just talking about what we're doing, what they're doing, or just has real estate questions in general. And probably, of course, what's more pertinent to what we're doing is anyone that wants to talk about design and development or design and value add development and has questions, I'd be happy to have a conversation with anyone.
All right. Well, thank you so much. It's been absolutely wonderful. Love this call.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Always great to see you both.
Yeah.
And thanks
Thank-
everyone else for joining. I really, I appreciate you hanging out with us for a little bit this evening.
All right.
Thank you.
Have a good night, everyone. Thanks again. The recording will be on YouTube /@ hookup with real estate in a few days. Take care.
Thank
Bye.
you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Jen.
Bye.
Thank you all for attending.
Bye.